Welcome. Tonight's program is about ALS and technology. I'd like to start with Julie, actually. Julie is the project manager at Google AI.
Hi.
And Julie, can you share with us some of the new technologies that you're coming up with?
Yeah, sure, of course. It's great to meet everybody. I'm a product manager in Google Research, and actually Bob and I both work on Project Euphonia, which is an effort focused on making speech recognition technology, which is used in smart speakers such as the Google Assistant or the Google Home or Alexa, for features like home automation or dictation or things like that, and try to make this work better for people who have ALS. So we actually have a few slides to present, so I will only say that for now, and I will keep the details for the presentation.
Okay, beautiful, thank you. Blair, good evening, Blair. Blair's from Team Gleason. Can you just give us a little review of what Team Gleason's about?
Absolutely. So I want to apologize ahead of time if I have any difficulties. Turns out my son came into my office and he pressed a lot of buttons, and for some reason, a lot of my technology is not working, and I didn't have enough time to troubleshoot. So for that, I apologize. Team Gleason was started by former Saints player Steve Gleason when he was diagnosed with ALS in January 2011. And our goal since then has been to innovate and provide leading edge technologies for people to help them continue to be independent and live their lives the way that they want to. So it's the
beautiful.
For sure.
Thank you. Hey, Bob, bring us up. Bob is the technical program manager at Google. Bob, can you give us just a little overview of what you're up to?
Yeah, hi everyone. As Julie mentioned, she and I are working together on Project Euphonia. And as it turns out, we've also been working for quite some time with Blair and his team at Team Gleason. Julie and I will be going through more of the details, but really the idea is that we desperately need to partner with people who have ALS and organizations like this who are working across multiple areas to improve, independence and, other quality of life measures. Our focus, as Julie mentioned, is on improving communication through technology. And the key to success for that is to expose our technology to as many voices as possible from people who have ALS. So I'll focus, when we get into the details, on kind of what that looks like in terms of collecting samples of everyone's voices.
Beautiful, Bob. Thank you so much.
And to that regard, I just want to add, we are, as EverythingALS, we're kicking off a project to do voice analysis and working with Google Euphonia group as well. So it's in works. It's probably going to be now announced in the next few weeks here.
Beautiful. So Julie, let's get into some technical adventures that you've been on.
So yeah, we already introduced ourselves, but Bob and I work both at Google, specifically in Google Research, which is a sub-organization at Google that is looking into machine learning research and how it can be applied to useful applications. So I was thinking that for today, one thing that might be helpful is to start by defining what do we mean by machine learning and AI and all those words that we hear a lot of and that are part of our everyday work life for Bob and I. So just define what it means. Hopefully that's helpful for you. And once we've done that, we will talk specifically about how machine learning can be helpful in terms of communication for people who have ALS. Just checking, can you see my slide correctly?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, so what is machine learning? Yeah, so even started taking a step back and thinking, at the very first step, here at Google, we build a lot of algorithms. And first things first, what is that? So you can think of an algorithm as a kind of a recipe that describes the step needed for a computer to solve a problem. And one distinction that's quite important is some algorithms are what we call rule-based, which means that we explicitly tell it exactly what to do. One example for that, if you think about email spams, which I'm sure you all must have received one day, emails that you wish didn't come to your inbox. One way to remove spams automatically is to create a list of words that are commonly found in spammy emails, and just basically tell the computer, if an email contains such words, please discard it. Don't show it to the user. So yeah, that works okay, but only if the spammy emails contain exactly the words that you put in your list. So now there's another approach, which is machine learning. And in this case, instead of trying to come up with an exhaustive list of keywords or of attributes to describe spammy emails, what you can do instead is ask your users to let you know when they receive a spam email. And after a while, especially if you think of products like Gmail that have a lot of users, you end up with lots and lots of examples of emails that have been flagged by users as spammy. And once you have a lot of examples, you can basically teach a machine learning model to automatically detect them in the future. And it will be more robust than simply coming up with a list of keywords. So yeah, these are kind of the two types of algorithms that exist. And in recent years, machine learning has been a very popular technology. And at Google, we especially Google Research, we work on a lot of machine learning based algorithms. So at a high level, there's two kind of processes when it comes to teaching a computer to learn something. So one part is called the training, and this is the part where we show an algorithm a lot of examples of something. In general, machine learning relies on data, and actually labeled data. So we need to have some true examples, what we call ground truths, to tell the computer what to look for. So on this example, if I were to give explicit rules of how to recognize a cat from a dog, I might say, oh, one has pointy ears, one has, I'm not even sure, frankly, but you would come up with some rules. But if you're using machine learning techniques, the only thing you need to do is to actually have a pile of data and label it, consistently say, okay, this is a cat, this is a dog, and show this to the computer. So that's kind of like the way training works. And then, you want to know how accurate is your model. So the way to do that is to show the model images it has never seen before. And based on how you trained it, you will get a different result. And if the model is right, great, you have one good data point. And if it's wrong, you can basically show this new example to the model so that it learns something new and take it from here. So when we speak about machine learning, that's what we mean. It's essentially new kinds of algorithms that learn from looking at a lot of examples and that can make predictions on a very broad variety of topics. So yeah, it can, like I said, you can identify cats on a photo. You could even distinguish cats from bunnies. One more difficult topic is to distinguish blueberry muffins from dogs. So it's of course a joke, but actually for problems like that are quite ambiguous, it's good to have, if you know that, imagine a world where all you've ever seen in your life are little dogs and little cats, then you might get confused if you see a blueberry muffin. So having additional labels that show examples of things that could confuse a machine learning model is also very beneficial. So some examples of applications that have been developed at Google and that rely on machine learning are, for example, Google Translate. You can see on this animation actually 4 different predictions. The first one is, are there letters in there and where are they on the picture? And then what text is on this picture? Then translate it and then you know, show the results on an image. So this is based on machine learning. And same for, maybe you are using Gmail or maybe not, but there's a new feature which allows you to have quick responses. When you see a question from somebody, Gmail will suggest some responses to you. So this is also based on a bunch of emails that other people have sent, and basically your phone is trying to take a best guess at what you might want to respond to somebody. So yeah, this is just in a nutshell what we mean when we say machine learning. And now we're going to tell you a little bit about, okay, how can this technology help with people who have different types of speech, and for example, people who have ALS. And Bob will actually talk you through those slides. Bob, if you want, I can go through the slides since I now have the ability to do that.
Yes, that sounds good. Continue to use that superpower. So as Julie mentioned, you know, the underlying technology that we're really taking advantage of is called machine learning, and one of the main ways one of the main benefits of using this is the vast amount of work that's been done using machine learning and collecting data for kind of a standard population base, as Julie mentioned, for Gmail, spam, and other mainstream applications. And speech is no different. There's been a very, very large and extended effort to collect voice samples so that things like voicemails can be transcribed and other things can be transcribed accurately. And these kinds of samples also get used for translation, for translating from one language to another. So anyway, part of what we're doing at Euphonia is trying to tune these models, which already have seen a very large investment, and just tune them so that they work better for people whose speech falls outside of the realm of what the current systems have heard. And the way that we do this is basically we take recordings just from an audio file that you know, requires no special equipment. Any piece of equipment with a microphone and an ability to record can produce an audio data file. That's the first circle. Then the second circle, the colorful one, shows visual representation. So what we do with that actually is kind of interesting. We turn that into something that looks like a picture. For those of you that you know, have a background in audio or related technology, we're basically looking at the frequencies in that speech through the file. So from the beginning of that sound bit to the end, and we basically then from that point forward, we treat this like an image recognition problem. As Julie mentioned, there's a lot of work on figuring out what pictures have objects of different types, cats or dogs. So we basically convert that audio file to an image, and then we basically take it from there. So if we move to the next slide, Julie. So at the end of the day, you know, the goal is that we can have speech recognition work better for people across a wide range of applications or products. And we think this is particularly important because there's just an increasing number of ways that technology companies are allowing users to talk to devices to get things done, to improve communication, or to make things more convenient, to allow people to be more independent. And so we just want to do what we can so that the underlying speech technology that allows things like the Google Home or Google Assistant to help people get things done work better for more people. So let's move on to the next slide. So the real challenge is, what's required. This is a picture of Dimitri. He's an engineer that's been working at Google for a number of years, a computer scientist, and he lost his hearing when he was very young, and so he learned to speak, and actually he learned to speak English well after he had lost his hearing. So he has a very atypical speech pattern, and so we worked with him, and he basically recorded thousands and thousands of his own voice samples, and some of the early work was done on this that looked like it was very promising. We could use those voice samples to adapt our standard speech recognition system to better understand Dimitri's speech. And the way that we would measure that is we look at the text that our speech recognizer puts out after Dimitri's done saying a phrase or a sentence. So if we move on to the next one, so that gave us a lot of hope. And over the last couple years, we've basically been on a campaign to accumulate voice samples from an increasing number of people with a widening diversity of speech patterns. And in fact, one of our earliest partners that we worked with was an organization called ALS TDI that many of you might be familiar with. And they really helped turbocharge some of our early voice sample accumulation efforts. They worked with our engineering team to develop a set of phrases that then they could provide to patients that were involved in the programs that they're working on. So what we're showing here is a chart of how our data has grown over time. And it really started with a core group of people who were motivated in the ALS community to see what could be done to help us advance the research, because we really had no idea what the possibilities were at the beginning. We still don't have a firm timeline or understanding of exactly how much data and exactly when something that would come out of this research could be integrated into a product. But what we do know for sure is it's been worthwhile working with the different communities to collect the data, because it looks increasingly promising as we move forward. And I'll show you a little bit more about that. Julie, shall we move on to the next one? So here's an example of a campaign with the Down Syndrome Society of Canada. And should we see if that works over Zoom?
So let's see this. Sorry, need to figure out. Oh, maybe this is okay. Let me just mute myself and then I will play the video.
I'm not hearing the audio, Julie.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
we can. So do you know how to play a video on Zoom? Otherwise, maybe we'll just skip the videos. I haven't done this before, so I'm not sure.
You have to unplug your headphones.
Ah, okay.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Okay. let's just do that then. Just give me one sec.
Hey Google,
Yeah, we can hear now.
to say degrees.
My apologies, I don't understand.
My daughter, she has a smaller mouth, she has a longer tongue. Picture talking with the marshmallow in your mouth.
Technologies that are activated by voice commands are becoming a way of life.
Scheduling and reminders, practicing phrases, speaking to friends.
For people where that doesn't work, that must feel very sort of disempowering, or like they're being sort of left behind.
I see him being able to not need to rely on others as much.
Hey Google, what is the weather in California?
We're all very excited to partner with the Canadian Down Syndrome Society. The goal is to make speech recognition work better for people who have different types of speech.
I'm teaching Google.
I'm teaching Google.
I'm teaching Google.
Thank you for coming to Google.
Thank you.
Out of the box, Google Speech Recognizer would not recognize every third word for a person with Down syndrome, and that makes the technology not very usable.
What we really need is for people with Down syndrome to volunteer, go on the website and record phrases and donate their voice.
I owe you a yo-yo today. Strawberry jam is sweet.
The more voices we have, the better the technology will get.
Hey Google, turn off the lights.
This is basically the fundamental frequency, and we kind of look at how these frequencies move, and that's corresponds to the words that you're saying.
When I started doing the project, first thing came to my mind is that it's really helping a lot of people be more independent.
I think voice technology is so important to give a voice to the voiceless. I think that's fantastic that we live in a world where that's even possible.
Hey Google, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
So that gives an example of the data collection, kind of the outreach campaign. And then maybe we should just show them a brief snippet. I know out of interest of time, we also, Blair's queued up to give an overview of Team Gleason, so I want to be respectful.
That's okay. We're enjoying this, so take you. You can have
okay.
Time.
So yeah, our call to action we always put in there is our website, g.co/euphonia. But maybe we also show them just a snippet of one of the videos, Julie, that that kind of shows one of the use cases.
Yeah, sounds good. Should we show the video call with Kaisa?
Yeah, I think that would be perfect.
Okay. So I will go ahead and play the video, and just so that everybody understands the video, we actually, you can see on this video one of our trusted tester who is based in London, and she's using one of our prototypes to transcribe what she's saying in real time, and we're having a video call with her with our app transcribing everything she's saying in real time. So this is just to show you the kind of use cases that we're working on. So I'll play the video.
Which meant I had to get up at 6 to be in hospital by 9. This is for a clinical trial I'm doing on something called neurological.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll just pause here. But as you can see, the app was transcribing what she was saying. It was not perfect. at all, but actually this is a speech recognizer that has been uniquely designed for her. So it works better than the classic kind of speech recognition models that is available in Google Assistant or Google Search, and it can help understand her when she speaks.
Great, thanks. And so that gives folks an idea that yeah, the technology is showing signs of success, but as we train these, these systems learn in a way that's not too different from how humans learn. We learn to speak by looking at a lot of examples or a lot of repetition, listening to other people around us, trying things out. And that's how these models learn, is basically we expose them to more and more examples. And those examples could include new words or new sounds. If it really hasn't been trained on those, it's not going to be very accurate. So this gives you a sense, for some words it gets with a high, it gets right most of the time. In other cases, there are words that maybe it hasn't built into its vocabulary, or sound patterns that are less common. And so this gives you an idea of the nature of the challenge. We need to hear from a wide variety of people, and then a fairly wide variety of speech, so that the system can develop the expertise that you would expect. So anyway, that's a kind of a snapshot of what we're doing. And Julie mentioned the woman in London there is a trusted tester. We do have an early prototype that would be way too frustrating for the average person to use. But there's a small group of people that that kind of have the fortitude and have gone through the rigors of recording a number of phrases for us, like over 1,000 phrases. And it seems like it's getting close enough. The accuracy is getting reasonable enough to give it a try. So that is sort of the context for where the model that this woman is using came from, and how we're testing it out.
Beautiful, Bob. Thank you. Julie, thank you. Julie, can you make a comment about Tim Shaw and how you worked with him?
Yeah, sure. We've been working with Tim since the very beginning of our project, actually. Inspired a lot of this work. And so with him in particular, we actually did something that is a little bit different from what we talked about in this presentation. We tried to recreate the way that his voice sounds like, or used to sound like, when before he even had ALS. And so he was an NFL player. He had a career in the NFL before he was diagnosed, and he participated in a lot of radio and TV interviews and shows. And so he sent us the footage of himself speaking, and we using very similar techniques of machine learning, we actually used the recordings that he gave us together with the transcription of what he was saying to produce a model that sounds like him. This is also very much a research project and not something that exists as a product or anything. We only did that for Tim, actually. But yeah, the goal was to allow him to speak with his own voice instead of using a standard text-to-speech voice, when he communicates with his Tobii device. And so we shared a little bit more about this work in a YouTube episode that we can share later if there's interest in learning more about that.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm sure that Tim really appreciates him being able to use his own voice. And I look for the future for everybody to be able to use their own voice if they would participate in donating their voice. So folks, thank you so much. I'd like to go over to Blair now and see, Blair, how do you just flow into this conversation with your organization?
So for starters, thank you everybody for having me, especially the last conversation we had a few weeks ago. Can't thank you enough for all the opportunities that we've had thus far and for allowing me to share not only Team Gleason's vision, goal, mission, but also the story of Steve, Team Gleason, and my involvement in it. So thank you. I remember when I got involved because I got an email from Steve on January 6th, 2011, from Steve. He was afraid, he was scared, and he wanted to write an email to me about how he wanted to be inspirational himself about beating his ALS diagnosis with the same perseverance and persistence that kept him in the NFL for 8 years. But deep down, he was frustrated and scared. And from that point on, Thursday, January 6th, 2011, everything changed. And, you know, for me, it was looking at why did this happen? How did this happen? And everybody that knows this disease, especially everybody on this Zoom call, it brings a lot of questions to mind. So for me, it was also looking at my friendship started with Michelle when I was a kid. She was my babysitter, and fast forward to play football in college, and Steve was still playing football for the Saints. We became close friends, and naturally he was like a brother. So I stepped in and became a caretaker for him and the accountant for the foundation.
Beautiful.
So Steve immediately started researching everything that was currently existing, and he decided that he wanted to start his own nonprofit, Team Gleason, with the motto of until there's a cure for ALS, technology can be that cure. Our goal with Team Gleason and mission is to provide leading edge technology and equipment, and also to provide and document life extraordinary adventures to raise awareness towards ALS, and hopefully, you know, our goal is to find a cure with all of our missions combined. So the main goal of Team Gleason and Steve's vision all along was to improve life for people living with ALS by providing essential and innovative technology and equipment with the main goal to enhance quality of life. And I think, you know, as it relates to what Bob and Julie were speaking on, you know, what they're doing is something that none of us ever thought would be possible at this point. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, especially with the few slides that I have, but you know, it really hits home because the things that we've worked on and becoming what we like to, or we've heard Team Gleason refer to as industry experts, is looking at everything that's existing in the medical device world and everything that's existing in the technology world, the consumer-based product world, and how those two worlds collide and interact, and what it means for a project like Euphonia and the impact that it will have. So recognizing where everything was in January 2011 and looking at 2012, and the first time we really dove into the first eye gaze unit when Steve just wanted to explore, we recognized that we needed to collaborate with experts. I mean, we needed to bring the two worlds together to really understand what was missing, right? What needed to be changed, and what partners, friends, colleagues, and family were going to help us accomplish this. So when we say technology is the cure, you know, we find these solutions through assistive technology manufacturers and distributors. You know, everything that we do is patient-led and driven. And then we take these ideas, concepts, opportunities, and we bring the right parties together to ensure their success. So everything that we've learned, you know, for me personally, started with Steve breaking everything that was available. Without breaking it, we would have been providing things that didn't have the right outcome. One of the main things that, you know, the first thing that I experienced with Steve was voice preservation. And I recall the 4,000 or 5,000 phrases he did with Saraproc and the amount of money it cost. And, you know, it took a family, a village, a group of his friends to go out and raise the money to allow him to just to keep his voice. And I remember talking to him about talking to his son and his wife and what it meant to him to have that. And I remember the emotion in his voice and and him being afraid. And one of the first things that we started looking into was voice preservation and what was existing and what we could do to ensure that everybody had access to the best opportunity. And so, you know, from that, we started working with Model Talker, Acapella, and fast forward to new initiatives that we're starting off, not just to give people the best option, but also a focal point to train the clinicians, to have access to the best clinicians in each specific area as it relates to accessibility. And voice preservation is one of them. And in the upcoming weeks, we will be talking, we'll be releasing some information about a new initiative that we have, and we're very proud to partner with the best of the best as it relates to voice preservation. As it relates to eye gaze, you know, I recall vividly this unit in particular, which this is 2012. I'll play this video. Let me know if it comes through.
Yes, it is.
Because Steve will probably lose his voice, he is preparing for the time when the only way he will be able to communicate is by typing words with his eyes. Thanks to technology, whatever he writes will be heard in his own voice.
So that video, when we look at where we were and where we are now, I remember the frustration, the anxiety, not just with Steve, but with his wife, his partner, and looking at where they were then and where they are now. The evolution of eye gaze is something that we're very proud to have worked with some of the best partners and companies to ensure that the accuracy, the availability, the access, all of those things have been continuously improved. And that's been a result of everybody that we've worked with, especially Steve, and all the people that have helped us improve the technology, the software, the process. So the next item that I wanted to bring up that we're working on and we have worked on is out of a research project, a hackathon with Microsoft, is the ability for somebody with a eye gaze device to drive their chair with their eyes. I remember this in 2014, and that was the first time he drove his chair with his eyes. I remember him taking that turn. I remember going around the corner, and I remember walking around and crying with him because he was able to do things with his son, things that he was always scared about losing out on. And it's taken us years to get this to the point where it is now. But we're fortunate to have passionate, smart people behind making sure that everybody has access to this. And I can't tell you the importance that it's had in his life and what it's meant to his family. Home automation. I don't want to continue to play videos, but I think most of the people on this this thread and group understand what environmental controls are. And a big part of that is being able to control your environment. And one of the things that we focus on as it relates to environmental controls is making sure it's user friendly, making sure that not just the person that needs it, but also the partner, family, uses it just how they know to use it. So as it relates to accessibility, Team Gleason focuses on its compatibility, accessibility across multiple operating systems and multiple input methods. So that way we ensure that if anything does change at some point, whether it be dexterity of your hands, whether it be your voice, or whether it be your eyes, you're using the same system throughout the process. You're just using a different input method. As it relates to a partner and family member, they're using it just the way that they know how to use it. They can use it with a switch. They can also use it with their voice, or they could be a part of their partner if and when they need to use their eyes, doing it that way. This is one of the projects that, we started working with Google and Euphonia. It had the initial appeal as it relates to Euphonia that we could continue to help people along these lines. But as it relates to innovation and what they're doing in use cases, we've really recognized a whole new area of opportunity people can continue to use Euphonia in different use cases. And these use cases require early adoption. So the technology that they're working on and the technology as it relates to the durable medical equipment industry and the technology industry moving forward, there's going to be a collision at some point. And I'm very excited about people that are already using automation and other independence providing technologies to increase quality of life every day, because as soon as you use that, there will be other ways to access it. And when we're talking about environmental controls and voice recognition, we're not just talking about automation, although I mentioned it, we're also talking about ability to communicate with the world. I mean, look at social media, we look at interaction. All of these technologies will allow you to do the things that we as humans thrive off of. And I can't put enough attention to that. When you lose one thing in life, you're constantly looking for another to make it up. With ALS, the interaction is something that, in a call with Zoe yesterday, we had a conversation about her dad, and we're looking at the things that she's working on and the importance of it, not just from one perspective, but from 360 degrees. I know that it's probably very far-fetched, but I think most of you understand it. The wheelchair industry, wheelchair manufacturers, distributors, we've been having partnerships with them for the past 6 years, looking at the integration and collaboration between communication devices and wheelchairs, automation and wheelchairs, you name it. We look at the wheelchair as a central command system. So we have partnerships in place with the manufacturers and distributors, not just to innovate, but look at what everybody currently has and how they can use it to their advantage. Similar to leaders in the technology industry, that's what we've been focusing on. I've mentioned a few times today, advancements in technology, as I've seen personally with Steve and thousands of others, increase the quality of life. And as we look at what we've done with Team Gleason from 2011 to now, year to date, we've had 3,016 requests that we've completed as of today in our staff meeting. And that's not things that are still open that we're waiting to provide. I mean, we'll likely provide 10,000 units of technology in 2020. And that's a result of part of my friendship, badass team, badass leadership, and Steve's desire to change something that nobody just had a sole focus on. So what's next? What's next is we're actually creating, and the next 2 weeks we'll be finishing an assistive technology lab. We're going to use this assistive technology lab to test products so that people have questions about what they can use their technologies for that they currently have. We're going to use it for education. We want to educate clinicians. We want them to cross-educate from speech-language pathology to occupational therapy. And then we want to collaborate. We want to bring in the best of the best, a Microsoft, a Google, hopefully Apple at some point, Comcast, to bring everybody together to see what everybody's using, how they're using it, and how clinicians can start recommending some of these things that aren't necessarily what they normally talk about in their interactions with people that need it. Advancing communication is something that rate of communication with eye gaze has been very difficult. Voice to text has been something that I think is going to improve in the near future. And bridging assistive technologies with research, finding opportunity to collect data with what people are already doing, as opposed to creating projects to capture data. It's a goal of ours to find a way that we can have people give their data just by doing what they're already doing. And the future is, I'd really love to see BCI and wearables take a huge leap into assistive technology, especially for people with ALS. It's something that we've been looking into for about 4 years. And as of recently, there's been a lot of potential, and we're very excited about what it can hold. We just need to ensure that it works well. Also, it has the funding in place to make sure that people that can benefit from it will benefit from it.
Blair, you're very clear in your mission. We really appreciate all the energy that you're putting into it and that you came here tonight to explain it to us. And I'm sure that we have some questions for this panel tonight. Zoe, do you have anything cooking there?
Yeah, hi everyone. Awesome job to everyone that presented. And I love the passion. As always in this group, there's always so much passion and so much emotion, and we often leave these meetings in tears, actually. So I just love this group, and I just wanted to say that. But let's jump into some questions. For Blair, there was one question about using the eye gaze outside and some difficulties that come up with like the sunlight and reflective surfaces, and how eye gaze usually doesn't work for some people outside, and if there are some things that you can think of, some options to kind of remedy that.
So there's a few things as it relates to the current state of eye gaze and IR-based eye tracking. Unfortunately, because it is an infrared camera that's taking high resolution pictures, we're subject to UV light, right? That is a direct disconnect that will interrupt the signal between the eyes and the sensors. There's been, advancement, but the general concept of IR-based eye tracking, unfortunately, from what we've seen, won't allow, the ability to 100% work with 100% calibration in direct sunlight. Now, what we've seen in the past 2 years with the newer versions of eye trackers, they're working better in shaded areas or not direct sunlight. But one of the things that, we've been hearing about is basically the change from an IR-based eye tracking system to an RGB eye tracking system, which will eliminate, I hesitate to say that, but will certainly reduce those scenarios. I think they're getting better with IR eye tracking, but it's the nature of the beast with the base of technology that exists that it can't be one or the other. It's not going to work overnight. Steve has had that issue for a long time. It's something that we've been proactively trying to find opportunities to fix. So I would love any input from anybody on this call to provide any input that they can, because we're always looking to find opportunity to change it. I wish I had a better answer, like you could do this and it will completely be fixed. But if I said that, I wouldn't be telling you the honest truth.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that, Blair. I'm gonna ask a few other questions that are in the chat. Some of them were answered inside the chat, but I'm just gonna ask them anyways so we can talk about them. So the next question is for Bob, and it's about the what you're doing to help patients who have lost their speech completely.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I really appreciate that it was brought up. So there is a point beyond which we expect that that no speech recognizer in the foreseeable future would be able to accurately translate the sounds that someone is able to make kind of in those later stages, if they can make sounds at all. So we do have an even earlier stage research project that's focused on exactly this situation. The idea is to use a camera or some other device to detect some signal that someone is providing. And that signal could be a raised eyebrow, an open mouth, some sort of a button that they can push like with their thigh, or some other voluntary muscle that they still have control over. And to basically have that connected to a system that will take a specific action. And this was motivated by a program that was kind of put out just for general public consumption called the Teachable Machine, that allows people to train a very simple machine learning system to do like a few small actions. So what we're trying out now with the first 2 people is using a camera on the cell phone that's mounted facing them. And when they want to call for assistance, they do the motion that is one that they can do on a repeated basis. So with one of the individuals, he can open his mouth, and that's his preferred way to train this. So basically this individual trained the system using his own preferred action. And whenever he does this motion, it will send a text message to one of his care providers, notifying them that he'd like assistance of one type or another. So this is super early stage. And I would encourage people, if you're interested, reach out to Indu or to me directly. My email can be sent out to the group.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds awesome. Okay, another question that was asked is regarding a sandbox that we can use to train with our own voice. And that was to somebody from Google.
I can take that one also. We do have a vision medium term that that this type of technology, the type of technology being machine learning that's trained off of voice samples.
Your camera's not on, Bob?
Oh, okay.
There
Let's
we go.
see.
Now you
It
are.
might be my internet connection. Is that working now?
It is.
Okay. So I'm not aware of a sandbox that is available today to do anything like that. Our goal over the long term, and this is where the partnership with EverythingALS really kind of aligns well, is to create tools like this and data sets that people could use in many different research teams or just individuals. But it's going to take some time to put that in place. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, so another question is, can you use an eye gaze to speak to Google Home and give commands that way?
That's a good question. Can you use your eye gaze computer to speak to Google Home? And
And anyone can take that, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna punt that over to Blair if he's on the line still, because these guys really are the gurus of how these different technologies from different companies fit together. But I can be a backup in case Blair is not able to connect in.
Yeah, I got it. Can you see me okay, Zoe?
Yeah, we can see you.
You're
All
good.
right, so we've looked at every back channel way to do it. So like BlueStacks is an Android emulator. So looking at an app-based system like iOS or Windows, BlueStacks gives you the ability to actually use Google Home in its entirety. And I know that is still being perfected even without it. So we've had some success without it with an emulator, but a way that definitely works is with an Android emulator. And so the answer is yes, it does work.
Well, great. That
I
sounds.
have Bob here and Julie, so they're way smarter than me. So if they would like to step in too, they definitely trump me.
Okay, any other comments from Bob or Julie?
No, I think again, I defer to Blair. These are the people that make it happen.
Okay, I think this is the final question, but if anyone at any point thinks of anything, just put it into the chat and we can always ask them later on. Oh, there's another question. My bad. Okay, so one of the questions are regarding thought-to-speech and if there are any updates similar to what Neuralink is doing or Braingate.
Know about those projects. Do you, Blair and Bob?
No, I'm not aware of anything that that is kind of warrants talking about beyond what Blair alluded to. So, Blair, any thoughts to provide any more color on that way of getting information out of the head?
Yeah, there's nothing that I would say concrete that I'd be confident saying in the foreseeable future as it relates to BCI. I mean, we've heard a lot about Neuralink. I've actually visited with Neuralink, and they're working on some pretty amazing stuff as is. a handful of other leaders in the technology industry. But as it relates to the here and now, I don't see it in the foreseeable future. It's definitely possible, and they're on to some great things. But as it relates to this conversation, it's not something that I don't foresee us actually being hands-on with in the upcoming months for the next year. That's just my opinion, though.
Okay.
Hello, can I jump in or?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Sorry, my name is Junwang. I'm actually also a researcher. I'm just interested about this seminar, so I just joined in. We did some recent updates. I'm an associate professor at the University of Texas in Austin. We actually recently did something about the thought-to-speech about ALS patients. It's actually, I think it's promising. We just submitted a short paper to a conference called InterSpeech, actually last week. But with the data, our data is very small, but I think it's promising. So basically, if we ask, we ask just 3 patients to imagine a few small sentences, like "How are you doing? Good afternoon." Also using machine learning, we can, the accuracy, of course, the exact number, that actually could be up to like 80%. So like a thought-to-speech decoding accuracy. So the idea is for the BCI, we can just try to decode what patients wants to say using their thoughts, and just use a speech synthesizer to create the sound. I think a lot of people are working on this. Not a lot, a few groups are working on this right now. I think probably those are probably, as far as I know, probably the first kind of a demonstration for ALS patients. People has been focusing on healthy people just to test the models. Hopefully, probably in a few months, if the paper will be accepted, so we'll put it online so you guys will get more information.
Okay, well that sounds awesome. Thanks for jumping in.
Okay.
Beautiful. I have a question
and we're
here
working
for...
with Junwang as well, you know, on the voice project. So actually, Bob and Junwang have talked to each other, but it was on the phone, so you haven't seen each other. So there you are.
Yeah. Good to see you now, Bob.
So there's actually a few more questions on the chat. Is there a possibility or intention to share the speech collected by Project Euphonia to the research community?
So the way that the data that we're collected so far, basically the permissions to share that data have, the users only grant that to one company. We do allow anyone that has gone through the work of recording those samples can send a note to our team, and we'll send them back all of the speech samples. Medium term, there's very much ambition to create a publicly or a more broadly accessible set of speech data, but that's not immediately available. We're hoping that it's not too far over the horizon, maybe in the next year or so.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's something to definitely look forward to. Another question that we got is about donating normal sounding voice that hasn't been affected yet, and whether that would be helpful in any sense. And I think that's directed towards Project Euphonia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I can answer, and Bob, you should also jump in if you want. But actually, we are currently only collecting speech samples from people whose voice have been affected, just so that we don't waste anybody's time, basically, because there's already a lot of data that we have from people whose voice is not affected. But I think you're also hinting to the fact that maybe there is value if somebody knows they have ALS, but their voice is still normal sounding, as you described. That's actually an interesting question. So I would say the answer is we're not doing this right now. But I agree there might be value in doing that, and maybe something we should discuss with
Yeah.
our team, within the team.
And in particular, John Costello, for my message banking, you know, I think it was touching to hear Blair talk about some of the early recordings, you know, activities that Steve Gleason did. So yeah, so reach out to any of us, any of the people on the call could put you in contact with the folks for recording of the current state of voice, to the extent that there's potential to use that for voice recreation down the road.
Thank you.
Thank
You know, our goal is here, I know not everybody is affected by voice and probably will never be. Our goal is to make it as comfortable as possible as we are also fighting for the treatment. And next session in 2 weeks will be, speaker will be Merit Kutkovitz. She's the head of neurology at Mass General, and she is called the godmother of ALS. She's dedicated her life to, you know, getting a cure for ALS. So she'll be talking about different trials that she's working on and different treatments. And so we're very excited to, you know, bring her in the next, in 2 weeks.
Beautiful. I have one important question to give to everybody, and that's, how can patients be more active in the development and utilization of current and future technology? So how many patients are you folks looking for to work with?
That's a great question. And so far we've heard voices from a few hundred patients. And we think, you know, we probably need to get hundreds more. So absolutely, the voice samples being, you know, one type of data that, you know, that's of course where our main focus with Project Euphonia is. Then the second way that I'll just kind of resurface from Julie's part of the presentation, when we think we made enough progress with an adapted speech recognizer to be helpful for someone, then a patient will start reaching out selectively to people to see if they're interested in testing out a prototype that would basically transcribe what they're saying in real time. So anyway, so those are at least 2 ways, and likely there's a longer list.
Beautiful. If you would like ALS pals to communicate with you, do they communicate with you directly, or do you have some other way of speaking with them?
Good question. So direct is fine, but also Euphonia-project@google.com will come to a group of us, so that there's an even higher probability of a timely response.
Beautiful.
Hey, Bob,
Okay.
can I ask a question?
Yeah. Surely.
So are you guys doing any analysis of the difference between somebody who has sporadic ALS that was caused by the environment versus familial? And to that extent, are you doing any differentiation of the voices that come from somebody that may have a particular bulbar palsy versus another, maybe a bulbar onset that's caused by lower motor neurons versus a bulbar that's caused by upper? Like, is there any analysis of that, or is it just kind of one global population?
Good question. So at the very beginning of our research program, as I mentioned, we were working with patients engaged with one research institution that was collecting that kind of data. And that's, you know, that's helpful, but an even more challenging task than what we eventually shifted to. So for Project Euphonia right now, we actually don't even collect that kind of information about, you know, any aspects of the medical condition. So it's not currently in scope. we basically kind of put them all together and let the machine learning system figure out what's the best way to kind of group, these different voices together. Longer term, there's definitely still intention to shift some of the research into these medical questions. So yeah, so it still might be, quite a number of quarters away before we feel we've made enough progress to tackle, one of these even more challenging aspects of it, though.
Yeah, I think one of the really fascinating parts of this may be exploring the people who have had concussions, right? Which would be certainly people like Steve Gleason and some of the other guys in the NFL who've had that repeated, minor TBIs compared to somebody who has especially the familial form, because it seems as if the people who have sustained repeated concussions are getting ALS at a much earlier age. And I'm wondering how or if that distinguishes the voice progression as well. So that would be pretty interesting to look at.
Yeah, one of the, just to kind of program, one of the questions that the researchers had asked us was whether we could build a machine learning model to, say, more consistently or maybe more accurately assess someone's state of progression. You can imagine if you're developing a therapeutic that you believe is slowing down the rate of progression, you would want a tool that was as sensitive as possible and as accurate as possible. But anyway, that again is kind of a longer term research program, and I think there are a lot of other aspects of it of just increasing the depth of understanding of how the different forms of ALS show up, and to the extent that euphonia is involved, it's probably related to, does that show up in their speech patterns? But again, that's kind of research for an upcoming stage once we've sort of got a reasonable progress on the communication part of it.
Thank you, Bob.
May I ask a question? Sorry. In terms of patients with ALS, because of the speech progression, would it be beneficial to have patients donate their voices over time to track, not only track changes in other research, but just to have the computer learn again as that progression follows through?
That's a really great question, and the short answer is yes. We don't ask everyone to do that because there's a lot of what we found is that you collect a little bit of data, do some research with it, and that really helps educate you on what's the most efficient data, what's the best data to collect next. So one of the questions is, if a model has been trained from an individual's voice, for how long will that model remain accurate as their voice changes? We don't know the answer to that, and we love to get the answer to that. And ultimately, one can imagine maybe there's some techniques that could be applied to extend the lifespan of that model. That's probably nearer term research that people that would be interested in that, we'd be interested in those kinds of discussions fairly soon.
So I actually have some more questions from the chat. One is regarding just like the timeline and approximately how many more voices do you need before the technology would be available to patients?
Yeah, that's if Julie's still with us, so part of the question is on the technical side, and the other part is on the user side. how good is good enough? And that's probably the right starting point. So if Julie could speak to that, that would be ideal.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, that's a great question. And actually, it's a question that we also ask ourselves a lot. And we want to collect a sufficient data set so that our researchers at Google can improve speech recognition. And we don't currently exactly know how many phrases or how many recordings or how many people need to be represented in the data sets. We're already running some research and experiments on the data that we have so far. But it's pretty clear to our research team that if we had more examples, we could do more work and do it more efficiently. So we're in a phase where we still would benefit a lot from additional recordings. We might reach a point where we have enough data that we feel like, okay, we can reach that goal, but it's not the case today. So that's why we're still actively asking people to contribute to the data set. So yeah, we don't actually have a very clear answer for that question, but it's a very good question.
Julie, to that end, when you're collecting the samples, is there, given that men and women process speech in different parts of their brain, are you seeing a differentiation in the loss of speech between men and women, or is that something you guys are looking at all?
So what we're doing is actually, we're not studying anything other than can speech recognition technology become better at recognizing what people with ALS say if we show it examples. So we're not actually studying the speech production or speech patterns or things like that. In fact, we have hired in our team 4 speech and language pathologists who are awesome and are really helping us understand the topic much better. And so they are giving us insights into how speech is produced and what patterns and signals we should be looking into. But we're not really doing the kind of research that you're describing, even though it's very interesting. I would say, though, that I think we happen to have a few women who have signed up to our data collection program so far. I noticed that just looking at the kind of recordings that we're collecting. And as any machine learning problem, you want to have as diverse as possible data set. So I think it's very important actually that we get more recordings from women. But that's more not necessarily to study the difference, but just to make sure that we have examples from both men and women when we try to improve the technology. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I have another question from the chat, and this one's actually for Blair, and it's about the independent drive system. And Cathy asked if it's available to people with ALS right now.
So I was actually messaging with Cathy just because I couldn't figure out how to not take my message off of private, because I've never done that before. It's available through, currently is Tolt Technologies, formerly Evergreen Circuits, and it's distributed through New Motion and National Seating Mobility.
Okay, thank you,
And we can send that information in the email. And just wanted to add, Silver was our speaker 2 weeks ago. She works at UW as a physical therapist, and she said, "Thank you, Team Gleason. You enable many of my clients to get equipment when their insurance is denied." So thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Hey, Blair, we've had a lot of people ask about that who don't have insurance coverage. So what's been your experience, and is there something that we could do to help support the patients to get insurance coverage for some of this?
It's a loaded question in the sense that as it relates to the plan, so the difference between a standard Medicare plan and Medicare Advantage plan, or insurance, if somebody is still on an insurance policy, they're all different. And we've been kind of seeing trends from year to year, whether it be AAC or whether it be wheelchair denials. It's kind of been all over the place. I mean, one thing that we actually had a conversation today about is ensuring that we're looking at the future of legislature as it relates to accessibility and looking at what's next. I mean, for AAC, making sure that we have everything that we need covered. I mean, there was a time where we had a cap rental. Fortunately, we had the Steve Gleason Act, Steve Gleason During Voices Act, but then we're looking at one mount as opposed to two, a Florida chair. We look at a wheelchair. There's a time where seat elevators and these additional features were covered. And then there's a Medicare policy change and not. I mean, these are things that we know are important. We try to step in and fill the void, but oftentimes there's a bigger issue there that we really need to have the help of the community to change. So it's definitely a conversation that I would love to have, and I would love to get the input of the group to fix that.
Yeah, so Silver said she might be able to answer this a bit too. Love to have her input, and then let's touch bases offline, because I used to do insurance coverage work. So let's make sure we touch bases and see what we can do, both from a legislative perspective as well as where the gaps are right now for the short term.
I really appreciate
and Silver, please go ahead.
So like my experience is when the therapist write the proper letter, that's like that gets you the success of like getting approved very high. Some of the insurance companies they flat out denies, but oftentimes depending on how you justify, based on that you get 100% the success rate versus you get a 70% success rate. So we at my clinic, folks with ALS, when it comes to wheelchair and all the parts going into wheelchair, I would say we have 100% success rate. It's because we write really thorough letter to the insurance company so that when they read the letter, they meet the person that we are trying to get the equipment for, and hence they can see what's happening. I think a lot of times because of the time sake, financially we don't get paid for those writing letters. So oftentimes they just kind of check the boxes. Then the other end, the insurance societies, they're just checking whether they have all the list in or not. But my experience at our clinic is when you introduce somebody to the other, the person in the insurance part, they tend to say yes to the equipment you're asking them to approve. So I would say that building up the good justification letters, I think that's the one that we can kind of help them build in the in community of ALS.
Thank you, Silva.
And does that success rate include seat elevators?
That is not, that's completely denied, right? So oftentimes Team Gleason helps with that. Thank you. And oftentimes a family comes up with that. And New Motion's been giving us a little bit of a discount for that too. That helps.
Silver, are you sending those letters, the initial letter, or are you sending a subsequent peer-to-peer letter? That
initial letter. So I normally write basically a life story of the person. I give about 2-3 paragraphs of a person's life story. I believe in storytelling. So that's how people understand better other than a medical justification, right? So I normally write about 3 paragraphs of who she is. Let's just say I'm writing about Indu, then I write about what she likes, when she got diagnosed, what she enjoys, so that people get to know her before I ask this about $20,000 chair. So then they already met the person. It's hard for them to say no. The things that they need to function in community independently.
Silver, that's brilliant. And I'll tell you why from a lawyer's perspective is because nobody wants to have that letter as the first exhibit in why coverage was denied. that would be my first exhibit I'd put up in the courtroom to a jury. And so you've set the insurance company up so that they can't deny it or putting themselves in the situation of having a bad faith suit. So huge kudos to you. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant for you to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Silver. Also, really quick, we have a question for Silver in the chat, asking if she's had iDrive covered before.
That is our speech therapist do, so I don't know. I honestly don't know. So I will, I've been recruiting my colleagues to get to this panel or like, you know, just join this group. So like I will talk to a couple of like a speech therapists who works with folks with ALS.
Okay.
So Silver, there was a question on the template should be available to all the clinics. Not having the template, would you be able to share a template so that the patients would have it?
I knew you would ask me that.
You know me too well.
Of course I will. Yeah, I will try to build up like so that I can share that.
Great, thank you. Awesome.
Any other questions from anybody? You can just say them.
That's an hour and a half, so good.
Katrina's, do you see Katrina's comment?
Yes.
So Katrina just wanted to mention that there is a National ALS Virtual Advocacy Conference on May 26th to June 3rd. So if anybody wants to check that out, sounds great.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that up really quick before we end, because this is a great opportunity for people who might not have wanted to go all the way out to Washington, D.C. to hear what advocacy points are being made, how they can best talk to their legislatures, their members of Congress, and get involved through advocacy if that's something that interests them.
Thank you, Katrina.
Okay, folks, it's been a fine evening with everybody, and I'd like to end it with I watched a speech the other night by Steve. The Congress gave out the Congressional Gold Medal, and Mr. Gleason was the recipient, and he gave a little speech. And one of the things he said in there that really touched me was, I had to share my weaknesses to survive. So people, please, your weaknesses are your power, but you need to share them with everybody that you can so that we can give you other angles on what are the possibilities. So folks, it's been a beautiful evening. So much information has been shared. I hope everybody tonight has a big smile on their face to know that all of these people are working together to solve ALS. And we're all part of the mission. So thank you all for joining. And once again, if any of you want to work with your voices, please contact us and we can help you get into the voice program. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.